rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective with me. All right. So, here we are. We're at, this is Thursday night. We're doing, the continuing attempts to see how the, having the multiple days of the week broadcast instead of Wednesday and Saturday only, is, going on. So there we go. There we have it. That's what's happening. So tonight, we're back to, or we're cut back to basically an hour of broadcasting. I'm not doing the full hour and a half like I do on Wednesday and Saturday. So there you go. Welcome. Thank you all for joining. I do appreciate you guys coming in. And I see the normal miscreants coming into the Rumble and the Facebook areas. We've got Becky over on Facebook, our Australia representative. We have Buddy Weiser Fat Paws. Haven't seen you in a little while. Hello, welcome. Amy, and looks like Bam's here as well. We've got definitely not Karen has popped in. I haven't seen you in a while either. And yes, to answer your question, definitely not Karen. I am trying out doing every night, doing it's for right now, it's a Monday through Saturday kind of thing, but eventually I might drop Saturday in favor of Monday through Friday. So that'll be awesome. Coco Dominki came into the chat too. Hello. Okay. Welcome everybody. I do appreciate it. Boy, I've got a packed show for you tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about how the Lawfare, got my little gavel out, how the Lawfare is not necessarily helping the Democrats like they think. And yeah, so there we go. And Buddy just tossed out a challenge. I will never quit at 60 minutes. You're probably right. I don't think I've hit right on the dot very much with this show, to be honest with you. Okay, so anyway, so now what I need everyone to do is, if you are of a mind, please stand up, remove your hats, and join in with Ms. T of Texas from Rumble in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you, Ms. T of Texas from Rumble. Hey, listen, if you want to get your audio sent in, you can do so. Just record yourself saying the Pledge of Allegiance in your own style, however it is that you have learned it or want to do it. And what we can do is, or what you can do is, you can send that in to me at the email address of fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. And you can send me your saying of the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll get it put on. If you are a regular listener, you can kind of see I'm going back through and picking up some of the ones that have already been sent. So that'll, obviously I will take as many as I can, and I'll just keep rotating them. It's either that or you guys listen to me, which you already listen to me enough. So I don't know why. I don't know why you would necessarily want that. But anyway, hi, Picaric. Picaric has showed up as well. Hello. It's been a little while, and I do appreciate that comment. So there we go. All right. Let's go ahead and get the first sponsor out of the way, of course. And tonight, it's going to be the Institute on the Constitution, which was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission: to restore our constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Check this thing out. This has got 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather. The interior pages are tear resistant as well as water resistant. And check out that stitched binding. It goes all the way through the book. It has rounded corners, and it has been buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy approved, and my youngest whiskey warrior, of course, has verified the information inside will get you your civics exam badge in the Scouts. To get this wonderful document, keepsake, heirloom, pass it on down, because it has a 100-year warranty against materials and workmanship defects. You can send it back to the manufacturer if something goes wrong, and they'll either fix it or replace it for free. Get yours at constitution.americanperspective.online. And, of course, go and check out the Institute on the Constitution as well today. I appreciate them for allowing me to be an affiliate. And, yes, definitely not Karen. Billy actually did taste it. Outlaw dogs can attest to that. All right. So I'm going to kind of start off on, not that I really want to necessarily pat my back here, but I've been telling you guys quite a bit in terms of the economics section that, you know, the whole GDP thing and all of these other kinds of metrics that they've been using over and over and over again. And by metrics, they, meaning the government, has been using to kind of prove that the economy is just this wonderful roaring economy. And, you know, what do you call it? The roaring economy, and Bidenomics is working. That's what I was searching for, was Bidenomics. Bidenomics is working and all of this other stuff. Well, that has come to what appears to be an interesting little hiccup. Hopefully things will, we'll see if things will change. But because of the gridlock that has been going on in Congress, we actually have a more of what I believe is a realistic viewpoint of what the GDP is actually like. And for those of you that don't necessarily understand GDP is gross domestic product. It is a percentage based off of, the money that's being spent in all areas, whether it's consumer spending and government spending put together, which is part of the reason why GDP is kind of a little misleading when it comes to figuring out whether or not the economy is actually going well, because of the fact that you are including things like government spending, and government spending doesn't really produce anything. Government, as I've said on multiple occasions, doesn't produce a darn thing. All they do, it is in order to be able to give something away to someone, or to be able to put out something to someone, they have to take it from somebody else. That's the way government works. They take your taxes, and then, of course, they turn that around and they give it to other people in the forms of, paychecks or spending it on government programs, infrastructure, those kinds of things. Now, a certain amount, obviously, is constitutionally accepted because that is, government's responsibility according to the Constitution. But in reality, there's a lot of government programs that are out there that essentially, they're not constitutional from the perspective, the direct perspective on the fact that they're not federally mandated, constitutionally federally mandated. Well, here's the latest number for the first quarter of 2023 that came out, and this is showing up in the Epoch Times. U.S. economic growth slows to 1.6% in first quarter, lowest since 2022. Now, the main reason for this is because of the fact that consumer and government spending has been slowing. And, again, I've been telling you folks that the GDP has been pumped up. Those numbers that the government has been putting out, the 3% GDP, the 2% GDP, whatever it's been doing over the course of the last several years with Biden at the helm, they've been pushing it, and they've been creating a false security blanket, let's say, with the government spending. Well, since 2022 brought in a Republican-controlled House, spending has slowed down. And that's obvious because of the fact that, it took them forever just to pass a couple of bills with regards to things like our quote-unquote national security and the border package, which is still being, kind of kicked around and that kind of stuff. So don't be surprised because of that spending package that was just passed by the House and the Senate here recently that, the GDP changes and goes back up a little bit. But this particular number, I think, is actually more reflective of what the economy is actually doing in comparison to what the government and the Biden administration want you to believe it to be. And again, GDP is a broad measure of goods and services produced in the United States. The nation has not experienced 2 consecutive quarters of contracting GDP since the first half of 2022. Now, keep in mind, the old definition of a recession was 2 quarters of contracting GDP. So, we're potentially looking at something like stagflation. I've been talking about it, quite often on the program. And so none of you who have been here multiple times and have actually been listening to what I've been saying should actually be surprised by any of this. Now, consumer spending, according to the report, eased to 2.5% in the first quarter, and it contributed to nearly all of the growth in the last quarter. Government spending slowed to 1.2%, with all of it coming from state and local spending, not the federal government. Federal spending dipped for the first time in the last 2 years. Now, federal, state, and local spending, and this government spending, accounted for 13% of the first quarter expansion. So we're essentially looking at it, and again, it's a little early to say this, to really, look at this as a full-on indicator that we have a problem. But this is a bit of a challenge. And the reason being is because of the fact that you have things like this. The stock market started tanking after this was announced. And again, this is another indicator that when the GDP is up, most the stock market will tend to grow and will tend to increase. But because this GDP report came out and it's disastrous, stock market is taking a hit at the same time. Okay. And unfortunately, that's just going to carry on over. Now it dipped. If you happen to be on Rumble and you see this on my screen, you can see there's a post by Spencer Brown on X where GDP dipped more than expected in the first quarter of 2024, according to Thursday's advanced estimates. Q4 GDP was at 0.34. Q1's GDP expectation was at 2.5, but the actual number in Q1 was 1.6. So this is significantly lower than what they originally thought it was going to be. So that even indicates that things are potentially even worse. So yeah, this is this isn't exactly the best information or the best announcement, especially for going into an election year for the current incumbent oatmeal brains resident of the White House for that. And speaking about him, I don't know if anybody caught this, but Biden went on to X, let's be honest. It isn't Biden himself. It is actually probably some intern somewhere or whatever. But Biden has signaled that he is going to, of course, do a tax hike if reelected as Americans struggle from his inflation crisis. So when you have this and the GDP report and the stock market dropping as much as it did because of the GDP report, this is really not going very well for Joe Biden. And the thing about it is that he posted on X, listen to this, he posted on X, quote, Donald Trump was very proud of his $2 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly benefit the wealthiest and biggest corporations and exploded the federal debt, Biden claimed in a post on X. That tax cut is going to expire. And now here's the key. If I'm reelected, it's going to stay expired. Now, let's break this down just a little bit here. The biggest and wealthiest corporations benefiting from this, that actually isn't the case. In fact, even some middle of the road, folks have actually done analyses, and they all say the same thing, that the middle class actually received the biggest percentage of cuts in comparison, and that they benefited everybody. I mean, the tax cuts were across the board from the top all the way down, with the exception of the very lowest bracket, which didn't really receive anything. Of course, they're not really paying that much anyway, as far as that goes. But the thing about it is that, again, he didn't cut it for just the wealthy. He cut it for everybody. And I think everybody who pays taxes and has paid taxes under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is very well aware of the fact that the TCJA benefited everyone. Well, now Biden is stating it clearly, or at least his handlers are stating it clearly, that if he gets reelected again, because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, some of the provisions as a part of it will expire in 2025. As far as he's concerned, he doesn't want them to come back. And so, again, the point here is that a report from the Tax Foundation last month explained that Congress has less than 2 years to prevent the vast majority of Americans from getting hit with tax hikes. So his whole rhetoric that he's been throwing out there about, I promise nobody under $400,000 a year in salary is going to get hit with more taxes. Well, that's just throwing it away. He just threw that promise completely out the window with this particular scenario. And so the TCJA Reduced the average rates for taxpayers at all income levels because it lowered marginal tax rates, widened tax brackets, doubled the child tax credit, and zeroed out personal and independent exemptions, nearly doubled the standard deduction, and limited several itemized deductions and the alternative minimum tax, among other changes. The report that came out from the Tax Foundation mentioned average rates declined across all income groups and have remained below their 2017 levels since. So, yeah, he's getting desperate, I think, in terms of stuff like this. But it's not the only tax rate hike that he's looking at. As you recall, he also pointed out that he was going to do a capital gains tax, and he's proposing that that's going to be a 44.6% capital gains tax rate. And that is a 100-year high, by the way, for that. And this was part of his 2025 budget proposal. So for those of you that don't recall, capital gains is basically the money that you earn off of things that you own. For an example, you own your house. And your house appreciates in value. Generally speaking, real estate does do this. That's why a lot of investment companies will tell you that it's a good investment. But what'll happen is with this in particular, let's say you purchased your house at $100,000, and which I know that's like incredibly low, but you purchase your house at $100,000. You then go to, value it, and it values at $200,000. What's going to happen is you're going to be spending $44,000 of that $100,000 in gains in taxes. So you're looking at, just under half of what you're making on a particular item because of capital gains. Now, what's even worse, though, is the fact that he is actually looking at this as not when you sell, but as a tax rate that is on unrealized capital gains, meaning that every single year you would have to go and get an evaluation on your property, whatever property that is, and you would have to take that valuation and pay taxes on what would the potential expected capital gains would be on that particular item. Can you just imagine how much? I mean, this is just wow. Yeah, this also would be added on top of state capital gains taxes. For an example, California residences with this 44.6 federal could potentially face a 59% rate, while those in New Jersey, Oregon, Minnesota, and New York could confront rates ranging from 53.4 to 55.3. So in other words, you would be ending up spending more money in taxes than what you actually make on some kind of a capital gains in terms of anything of value. And this is bad. I mean, this is really bad. And so, Joe, I'm telling you, out of the people that are smart, I really don't understand. And I'm speaking specifically to those people who watch this show on a regular basis and are much smarter than those smooth-brained Democrats that are out there. I don't even understand how anybody can vote Democrat, knowing, especially for Joe, knowing all of this thing is going on. Well, it's not just the taxes that is going on. Some polls came out, and ironically, if you believe in coincidences with the whole Arizona, 18 Republicans being indicted in Arizona, and some other ones in Michigan, things like that, it's going to be very, very interesting. But this poll that just came out shows a shocking shift in views on illegal immigration, even among Democrats. So in this particular one, and Axios put it out, but they released the poll showing that American attitudes toward illegal immigration and the question of mass deportations have shifted. So half, including 42% of Democrats, say that they actually support mass deportations of what they call undocumented immigrants, which are actually they are actually illegal aliens. That is the legal term for anyone that crosses our border. And this is a Harris poll that did this. Harris did this. But as you can see, the share of Americans who say they support mass deportations, when you look at the general public, it's about 51%. Political affiliation, of course, Republicans came in at 68, independents came in at 46, and Democrats came in at 42 on this poll. And this article shows up in Red State, but that was an X or a X post or a Twitter post, whatever they call it nowadays. And it basically shows the survey of a little over 6,000 adults taken from March through April of 2024. The thing about it is that Axios, which is a left-leaning outlet, and I'm not talking like slightly left-leaning, I'm talking about extremely left-leaning outlet. They tried to spin the data by saying, between the lines, the survey found discrepancies between Americans' perceptions of immigration and the reality established by data. According to them, 64% believe that immigrants receive more in welfare and benefits than they pay in taxes, and 56% wrongly believe illegal immigration is linked to spiking crime rates. Well, both of those statements are actually false, because the answer actually is that illegal immigrants generally don't pay taxes. Yeah. So because they don't pay taxes, then yes, they do receive more in welfare and benefits than what they pay in taxes. Additionally, when you look at things like illegal immigrants or illegal aliens actually linked to spiking crime rates, just take a look at the news, folks. Just look at the news. I mean, Lake and Riley as an example, several other examples that are running around. So, he's not doing the greatest in these polls. He really isn't. Well, that's not the only one. Because of the economic forecast that I talked about here, there's a Morning Consult poll that came out that put Trump ahead in 6 swing states. The Trump is among the, well, obviously Trump being the presumptive Republican nominee, let's just face it, he is, leads Biden in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina, according to the latest Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll. Among the 7 swing states, again, that will likely determine the outcome, Biden only leads in Michigan, where the president is ahead by only 2 percentage points there. Survey found that Trump has a 6-point popular vote lead in head-to-head matchup with Biden across the 7 battleground states. Now, keep in mind, they do these things and they put head-to-head matchups. What you have is essentially possibilities where if you throw in the other candidates like RFK Jr., Cornel West, and God, I can't remember her name, Jane something or other. But anyway, they when you start throwing those in, they start pulling votes, honestly, away from Biden, because the only other candidates that are in this race are Democrat leaning or Democrat independent independent / Democrat leaning. And so they're probably going to pull those votes away from Biden. So that gap might even be a little bit further than what they are discussing in terms of the polls themselves. Well, it's not just that. Biden, of course, is underwater on top issues of inflation and immigration. This is another poll that came out. This is an Economist YouGov poll that also came out. And, once again, I keep pointing out, the Democrats are like throwing all of their chips realistically into the abortion basket. And they keep harping on abortion and, the abortion laws like the Arizona law, which, by the way, the Arizona House down there was voting on repealing that 1864 law. But the thing is they keep throwing their eggs into that abortion basket. And I have my doubts as to whether or not that is really going to be a defining. I mean, do I think it's going to affect the election? Yes. But I don't think affect voters, I should say, not necessarily the election itself, but affect voters. Yes, I do believe that there are going to be people who are going to vote for that. But I don't believe that it's the top issue. The top issues are going to be the economy. They're going to be immigration. Those are going to be the things that are going to be the top items within this particular scenario. Now, the poll asked if a little over 1,600 U.S. adult respondents to pick the most important issues for them 7 months away from the election, which is where we're at now. The top response was inflation or prices at 24%. So close to a quarter of the people say the number one issue that they have is inflation. And the second most popular choice was immigration. 97% of those respondents that labeled information as important, with 77% saying that it is very important. So you had 24% saying it is the number one thing, and 97% put it in the important to most important to the most important category. And so these are these are some bad numbers. And this is part of the reason why the whole lawfare idea and everything else is going to be like pushing. And they're really going to be pushing to try and make this entire situation even worse for Trump. They are just losing all over the place. And here's one more poll before I go to a break real quick. Only 21% of voters strongly approve of Biden, 49% strongly disapprove in this latest Rasmussen poll found, and raising re-elections concerns for the president. I mean, this guy, his polling data is right now is not looking all that great. And it just isn't going very well for him. And so this is exactly why we've got, the Democrats, they're in some serious trouble here. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see things like what you see going on the university campuses across the U.S. and stuff like that as we start getting closer. These polls keep doing this. That summer of love that happened in 2020 is probably going to be, I'm just making a not much of a prediction here, but just taking a stab at it and kind of saying that, yeah, it's going to be more worse. It's going to be worse than what the summer of love was all about. All right, I got to take a real quick break. These fantastic shirts that I wear, these patriotic shirts, not necessarily this one here, but some of the other ones that you've seen where they have like the American flag and the We the People, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, so on and so forth. Well, they come from a company called theflagshirt.com. That is theflagshirt, all one word, all lowercase, .com. And they have a bunch of patriotic gear. Let me show you what some of the things that they have. They have men's and women's. And hey, look at that. You can sign up for free shipping out of this. But they have stuff that is made in the USA. They've got all kinds of patriotic outfits. They've got spring gear. They've got T-shirts. They've got golf shirts. They've got hats, a bunch of patriotic accessories, socks, so on and so forth. And you can even get gift cards for those patriotic folks that you may want to not necessarily get their gear for them, but you can go and check it out at theflagshirt.com. But before you purchase, you should go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online to get yourself a coupon code that gives you $5 off your purchase. That's right. Go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online to get yourself a code to get a $5 gift coupon on the American Perspective podcast. But go and check out theflagshirt.com, and of course, go and get that coupon at flagshirt.americanperspective.online. They've got some fantastic stuff, and you'll see me wearing. I wear oftentimes I wear their shirts here on the program, and so you need to go and check it out, and of course, get yourself a $5 off coupon today. All right. So the lawfare that's going on in particular, this New York City Trump trial, that this is the first criminal trial, by the way, that he's actually jumped in on as far as like the New York City trials and stuff. This is one of the ones outside of the Florida one where he has the classified documents case, but this one here in particular is again a novel kind of a situation. And his being in New York, he has the judge who puts him in New York. He says he can't go anywhere else. During the trial, he has to show up every day. Well, Trump's actually using that to his advantage. And he is starting to campaign in New York. In fact, he's even talked about potentially flipping New York to Republican, and rather than it being a deep blue state, maybe turning it into more of a purple state, or, on the very outside chance of actually turning it red. Well, realistically, that trial, of course, is not necessarily hurting, as I just went through all of the polling. It's not hurting his swing state leads. Unlike what the Democrats want you to think, they think that, all of this stuff, like having a convicted felon and so on and so forth as a president, is going to cause a problem. It actually isn't. It actually isn't. And so Trump's trial is really not hurting him at all. In fact, it's giving him the opportunity, as Dan Bongino talks about. Campaigning is most often snapshots and sound bites, and it is giving him, Trump, the opportunity to provide those snapshots and sound bites. In fact, here was a snapshot and a sound bite that was done. So Trump at 6:30 in the morning goes out and gets to a work site. And when he is there, he makes a little speech. He meets up with people. He talks to the press, and that kind of thing. And there was a reporter who essentially now keep in mind, New York City, and I've been there. I've done, I won't say I've done work there in some cases, but I've represented folks and worked there. On multiple occasions. New York City is kind of like Chicago and Las Vegas. Everything that is a trade is a union job. So these are all union workers. You cannot work within the city of New York, the city of Las Vegas, or the city of Chicago for sure without being in the union. It just isn't going to happen. And so this is from a union worker. Now, keep in mind, how Joe Biden keeps talking about how he's a union guy. Okay. How he is the union guy and the worker. Listen to this.
What's it like seeing so many Republicans in Manhattan, so many Trump supporters in Manhattan? Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. It's turning now. Trump's turn again.
What's your message to Joe Biden?
Fuck you.
Yeah. So that was a union worker who essentially gave Joe Biden the big FU. And as you heard him say, he also said, it's Trump's turn again. It's Trump's turn again. And that's where I think a lot of people are starting to think, is that it is time for a passing of the guard, and Trump needs to come back. into the White House. I think everybody is, in terms of, and keep in mind, when I say everybody, I mean everybody with a brain, with a functioning brain. They all think the same thing. It's time for Trump to come back. And now, that being said, please, under no circumstances do you go with the idea that, hey, I don't need to vote. Everybody has to vote, because this is more than just Trump. 2024 is much more than just Trump. That getting him in the White House is going to start us back on the path of righting the ship in the course of this scary, scary turn of events that we've gone through. But Trump is talking about potentially, doing things to turn New York red. And I hope that he gets the opportunity to at least turn it purple, if not, even getting into a light pink. That would be fantastic. And it would be a huge blow to the Democrats, should he be able to perform that or do that in one way, shape, or form. Okay. So, one thing that did happen today is that the Supreme Court of the United States heard arguments on Trump's immunity case and his claim of immunity, full immunity. Now, if you were listening last night and you caught up last night's broadcast, I told you that I expected, even before the oral arguments started, that I expected the Supreme Court would more than likely question complete blanket immunity for the president, but may be more inclined to be a kind of a, if he's doing something official, then he gets immunity. If it's something outside of his official duties, then he doesn't get immunity. Well, that is pretty much the pattern and the way that the questions seemed to go today during the oral arguments. Now, this from the Epoch Times here. Supreme Court seems open to allowing some presidential immunity, and that this may delay the Trump trial. So one of the things that was obviously on display with the conversation that was going on and the questions that were being asked realistically by both sides of the political spectrum on the Supreme Court had to deal with whether or not and how to define whether or not official acts and private acts, and what's the defining difference between the two of them. Now, the thing about it is that, there were a lot of questions in regards to, well, when a president goes and visits or does a rally or something like that, is that an official act or is that a private act? And of course, obviously both sides of the table came up with a different definition as to what would one or the other be. But the thing about it is here, though, is this is actually, and even though the left is talked about presidential immunity, they've been seething over this, and they actually have. I mean, I spend some time in the cesspool that's known as X to see what the left is talking about on some of the social media outlets. But the thing about it is that the normal and reasonable person would go through the idea that, yes, if a presidential act or something that the president does is an official function of the presidency. For an example, we have instances where people were, and as sad as I hate to say it, but you have instances where our American people were left to essentially fend for themselves in Benghazi, as an example. That, unfortunately, that would be considered an official act. And so, yes, there has to be a level of immunity in some of those actions. Okay. So just removing immunity altogether, I think is off the mark. The same thing goes with like Biden killing a civilian in a drone strike. Okay. if Biden ordered the drone strike and, it ended up being the wrong target, well, I mean, obviously that could potentially hinder someone from actually wanting to do a thing that might be important for the protection of the country if they knew that, but just by them doing so, that would open them up to criminal and possible civil actions. And even the left side of the justices sort of brought up these kinds of things, and they were like, well, if we don't give some level of immunity, I mean, this, again, I'm sort of paraphrasing the feeling. If we don't give some level of immunity, then wouldn't that just destroy democracy as we know it and as it stands today? And so this is kind of the tact. This is kind of the tact that pretty much everybody who was listening on this has kind of taken. Now, the key here as to why it might delay the Trump trial. So the Supreme Court may say, look, we agree that the official acts need to be covered under presidential immunity. The personal acts or the non-official acts don't have that same immunity. But then they would go and kick it back down to the lower court, i.e. going back down to Chutkan, and say, you need to figure out what is an official act and help define what is an official act in this particular case and what is a private act. Well, if that happens, there's going to be a lot of back and forth in the courtroom, and that's going to put back Smith's timeline in trying to get this trial completed before the election. And so that's where the monkey wrench gets tossed in. In fact, that was something that Jonathan Turley was talking about in terms of how SCOTUS could actually throw a monkey wrench into Jack Smith's plans. And the reason being is again, of course, the most likely answer, like I've been kind of saying, is that you can't just absolve the president of complete immunity, but at the same time, you also can't hand it out there where he gets blanket immunity. And I think the happy medium realistically is going to end up being somewhere in the middle, because the Constitution, as some of the justices brought up, the Constitution doesn't talk about immunity from criminal prosecution. In fact, it talks about things like bribery and treason, which the treason itself is a punishable offense by death. So if a president commits treason but has immunity from criminal prosecution, that would mean that they couldn't be tried for treason, which would be a bit of a problem. A problem in terms of that case. Now, again, keep in mind, all of this has to be defined clearly by whether or not the president is doing something official or the president is doing something that is not part of his or her job in the presidency. And that is where the stickiness of this situation is going to be. I can tell you from past history, this is the perfect case, like I said last night, for John Roberts. Roberts loves to create very narrow and specific opinions. And so, it's going to be interesting to see what the final verdict is, but right now it looks like it's going to be maybe a 5-4, 6-3 split in terms of presidential immunity. And I think a lot of it is going to, again, be broken down along the lines of, if whatever the president is doing is an official act, is considered, immune, and then if he's doing something in his personal life, he won't be. Now, the funny thing about that kind of a definition, which I think is going to be interesting on this, is whether or not the president, who's supposed to be on duty 24/7, 365, the entire 4 years that they are in, how are they going to define or break out the idea of what's official versus what's personal? That list would be incredibly long. Just saying. All right. One last little spot that I want to talk to you guys about is True Grit Roots Network, TGRN.net. The TGRN Blues channel is active and live 24/7, 365, and we have got some fantastic shows on that channel. You should go and check it out. TGRN.net is where you can listen. You can also listen through the Live 365 digital or catalog of digital radio stations, as well as the Odyssey, AUDACY, Odyssey app. But I wanted to point out that we have some daily programming Monday through Friday that runs. We have the Morning Blues in the morning, which gets you up and rising with a nice mix of soft blues, nothing really hard, just to get you started with your day. Then we have the Blue Plate Special, which comes in at noon in Central Time and features different on-air personalities bringing their own unique specials for the lunch hour. And then after all of the shows are done at night, we have what's called Night Train. Night Train is where the conductor of the train takes you on extended sets of music, songs that you may not normally hear throughout the day because of the fact that you have things like commercial breaks and those kinds of things in play. Night Train gets you those long sets, those really long songs that are out there. And you'll probably hear some ones that maybe you've never heard of again. Again, that's Morning Blues in the morning, Blue Plate Special in the in the noon hour, and then Night Train after everything is done to take you into the next day. Go and check us out at tgrn.net, TGRN Blues. We are out of Austin, Texas, and the 100% Blues channel for 365 days out of the year. All right. Let's see. The last thing that I want to talk about before I let you guys go. You remember how I was telling you about the money that's been spent, the $6 billion that the Biden administration passed along to Qatar and had Qatar hold it, supposedly for humanitarian and health money and aid and that kind of stuff? Well, I got a bit of a blowback on social medias when I said, hey, that $6 billion, that was used for October 7th. That was used in order to fund the terrorists and some of that money has already been spent and used on some of this. In fact, one of the Biden administration's standing, and I believe it's I'm trying to think of his name. Austin. No, not Austin. I can't think of his name. I can picture his face. But anyway, they've all been saying that no, Qatar wouldn't give that money over. That Qatar would only release it for specific reasons and would only give it to the Iranians for humanitarian purposes. Okay. Well, guess what? This article came out in Just the News, and I just am going to use this as a indicator that, yeah, I actually think that Qatar is in league with Iran and wouldn't give a crap about whether or not Iran used the money for nefarious purposes. So here, this is a Qatar legislator, and I don't know if it's pronounced Qatar or whatever. I don't know. It could be. Anyway, there was a translation that a Qatari official basically said there can be no peace or negotiations with Israel. So this is a Qatari Shura council member has said there can be no peace or negotiations with Israel because their faith does not allow for negotiations, according to Middle East Media Research Institute's translation of the remarks. The video of the speech delivered by Essa bin Aman al-Nassar, a representative in the legislative body, in Qatar has been circulating around social media since Monday. In addition to serving in the Qatar Shura Council, he also is assistant commander of the Emirati Guard for Intelligence and Security at the rank of Brigadier General. The quote, part of the translation also says, there can be no peace or negotiations with the Zionist entity for one reason and one reason only. Their faith does not allow for negotiations. Rather, it condones deception, a violation of agreements, and lies. Indeed, over 22 years have passed since the Arab Initiative was introduced, and they are yet to accept it. They only accept one thing, killing, and they are slayers of the prophets. Now, I'm just going to point this out, okay? I'm just going to point this out, that what he just talked about is actually a part of the Quran. See, in the Quran, as I understand it, and I'm not necessarily a scholar of it, but in the Quran, it allows for lying to one who is not of the faith, meaning one who is not a Muslim. It allows for deception. It allows for deceit. It allows for all of that to go on. And so essentially what he is doing here is he is projecting those same philosophies onto the Israelis and saying that they can't be negotiated with. Now, if you think about this guy as a representative of the Qatari government, okay, what makes you think that the rest of the Qatari government, or a good portion of the Qatari government, doesn't think the same way? And so we handed the money, the Biden administration handed the money over to Qatar for safekeeping for Iran. And yet you have government officials who are in this body who are basically stating, in this particular case, this gentleman stating stating whatever he thinks out loud. Well, where do you think that the rest of the government body might be? And who in particular would be in charge of that money? I still think that it was definitely passed on. If not, it was promised by Qatar, hey, look, we'll go ahead and hang on to it for now, but here's the actual value of it, and you guys go and do what you're going to do. This is, yeah. I honestly, I mean, again, I don't think that they necessarily can be trusted with this money, but we went ahead and did it anyway. And they, of course, in turn went ahead and did October 7th, which started us in this whole thing and has gotten us into this scenario. Let's see, what else? Did I miss something here? Oh, okay. So, one other SCOTUS case. Boy, we're dealing with a lot of SCOTUS stuff this year. For this year, the Biden administration, let's just say, this has been a very deep legal situation. But coming back to SCOTUS actually listened to a case. And this was, let's see, I think it was yesterday, not today, but yesterday. So, SCOTUS was actually surprised. Now, this is dealing with the Idaho emergency abortions case. Now, that title is a little odd, because of the fact that it has to deal with whether or not emergency abortions can be performed in Idaho under Idaho's abortion law. And the thing about it is that the case actually deals with the federal law that deals with emergency care. And Idaho is arguing that, no, this isn't really a crossover of the law. This is actually just a mere different interpretation of that same law. Whereas the federal government is saying, no, you're actually you're actually trying to eliminate abortions completely. And it's not the way the news media is presenting it as far as that goes. But the thing about it is that after the conversations they were talking about it in per typical fashion with the overturn of the Dobbs decision, the justices, at least the quote conservative justices, have essentially kind of stated that, again, we're kind of like stepping on states' rights. Now, I mentioned before that the SCOTUS is actually more of a federalist type of SCOTUS than what we've had in the past. But yeah, so this is going to be interesting because it was Idaho in particular, but they were actually backed by 22 conservative states. And Idaho challenged the Biden administration's use of the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act as a quote unquote super statute that overrides its Defense of Life Act. So I don't know if anybody remembers, but I did mention that there were a bunch of cases that were coming up that were going to give us all a lesson in state federalism and the way that our government is really supposed to work. Well, this is one of them. So we're going to have to see how this comes out, but they, again, the justices, down the lines, the typical lines, the more conservative justices questioned whether or not the federal could actually usurp, in this particular case, could actually usurp the state. And so, yeah, that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that comes out. But that one was sort of, I won't say swept under the rug or covered up, but there were other cases that and other news that actually came out. So I thought I'd bring that to your attention. All right, we've come to the end of the program. Thank you very much for joining. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to Rumble, sign up for an account. It's free. And when you do, find the American Perspective channel and follow it. Additionally, I would appreciate it if you are already here, if you could hit that little thumbs up button, because the thumbs up button helps Rumble to identify the popular and liked channels and shows. And I would love to get on one of their leaderboards or even one of their editors' picks. All right. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and we will see you tomorrow. Same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on American Perspective. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.